I would like to introduce the writers today by way of their shared theme. Two Americans, actually, theologian and philosopher David Bentley Hart and journalist Dreher, although the latter lives in Hungary now, actually. It is not because these writers are common to be spoken of in the same breath, but regardless of their political and personal differences, I will attempt to bring them together because I think they can be used very fruitfully to engage with the idea of enchantment that has been gaining intellectual traction in the last 20 years or so. They have both released books in 2024, just last year. David Bentley Hart wrote All Things Are Full of Gods, and Dreher wrote Living in Wonder, both on this topic. Now, although it has modern predecessors like the Romantic movement in the arts, Henri de Lubac's Surnaturel, or Balthazar's Theological Aesthetics, a proper focused critique of the phenomenon of the loss of enchantment and how to regain it was probably Charles Taylor's fundamental work, A Secular Age, from 2007. On the first pages, Taylor poses the question why it was virtually impossible not to believe in God in 1500 and why it's virtually impossible to believe in him now. After a cosmological and a sociological reason, the third reason that he invokes was Max Weber's influential idea of disenchantment. Here on an ironic note, by the way. So Charles Taylor, when he uses the word enchantment for the first time, he says that he does so unhappily because he thinks it's a bit too magical, too invocative of fairies. Whereas David Bentley Hart, who's a notable believer in fairies and disembodied intelligences and who has just published a book-length interview with his dog, refuses to use the word enchantment. But regardless of fairies for now, we can go with Taylor and take Weber's theory of Entzauberung, or disenchantment, as a good start, even if some of the particular things that he reasons with would not be now standing up to scrutiny. So Weber says that the thematic unity behind the historical development of the modern West is rationalization. That is increased knowledge, growing impersonality, and enhanced control. This is outlined in Descartes' discourse on method with jarring precision, and I quote, "It is possible to arrive at knowledge that would be very useful in life, and that in place of that speculative philosophy taught in the schools, it is possible to find a practical philosophy by means of which, knowing the force and the actions of nature, just as distinctly as we know the various skills of craftsmen, we might be able in the same way to use them for all the purposes for which they are appropriate, and thus render ourselves, as it were," Descartes says, "masters and possessors of nature." Descartes also envisions the invention of an infinity of devices that would enable us to enjoy trouble-free the fruits of the earth. Now, apart from a certain hubris, linking technological progress with being trouble-free, that I think few of us would entertain after the invention of the atomic bomb or mass surveillance, regardless, Descartes' point is still tamer than what we have at our hands in this age, because he speaks of utility, he speaks of a practical philosophy which does not necessarily exclude the existence of the transcendental realities of God and therefore enchantment. There were, however, by the time, deficiencies in the classical worldview as handed on by the so-called Aristotelian Thomistic tradition, or what was left of it by the 16th, 17th centuries, that led to a search for a new method culminating in disenchantment. So Hart argues, and by the way, just when I say like David Bentley Hart believes or says or argues, his book on mental philosophy called All Things Are Full of Gods is a Platonic dialogue, which is between ancient Greek deities, because they don't have any believers on earth anymore. They have retired to a place called Metacosmia or Intermundia, as Epicurus taught, where they are spending their retirement having conversations about worldly matters. So when I say Hart says or Hart thinks, that will appear in the book as an argument put forward primarily by Psyche, and to a lesser extent Hermes and Eros, for various philosophical positions that seek to exclude idealism in favor of usually, though not exclusively, a materialist reduction. Hephaestus, the smith, the renowned artificer of many things, is responsible. This revival of the dialogue form in modern philosophy, apart from being a genuinely beautiful homage to philosophy right up to the 19th century, also allows for a more generous representation of challenges and disagreements. So Hephaestus gets to put forward his side, but also regularly interrupts Psyche, and that is, the argument favored by Hart, making the debate livelier as well as more intellectually honest. So Hart's point is that by the time of early modernity, the classical quartet of causes, that is material, efficient, formal and final, had become misunderstood. In a sense, the scientific revolution, when rejecting, as Descartes says, that speculative philosophy taught in the schools, they did not just reject the latter of the two causes, that is, final and formal, but all of them, mistaking them for forces in extrinsic relation to one another. They should rather, Hart argues, be understood as all four of the Aristotelian causes, as a contemplative look at the interweaving of logical relations, some coming from above, some from below, but all of them from within. Matter places limits on entities from above, for example, and form limits them from above, and so on. His suggestion is that the causes should properly be understood as not as forces, but as explanations, rationales, logical descriptions, or still better, rational relations. What does this then do? As a little jump ahead, I'll just say that the removal of the contemplation of the cosmos as a system of rational relations turned the image of God from the idea of infinite being and rationality into a deistic entity, a craftsman building and destroying things from without. Suddenly, there was this rift, this gap between God and his creation. In the fourfold system, had it not become regarded as a primitive version of modern physics, perhaps we would still have escaped the narrowing of the interpretative focus by contemplating a larger order. However, the false equivocation that led the causes to be seen as exterior forces did persevere. This in turn established a type of self-sufficiency that got rid of the formal and final causes, though again Hart would say that even material and efficient causes were misunderstood by getting trapped in the conceptual space of craftsmanship. Whatever the case, this focus on standalone Cartesian res extensa favored a certain type of knowledge that's impersonal, third person, quote-unquote objective, and most certainly quantitative. The three reasons behind this enchantment that Max Weber lists, increasing knowledge, growing in personality, and enhanced control, are then treated with a commentary in All Things Are Full of Gods, that is a more precise formulation, being that greater control was achieved by disregarding certain fields of knowledge and privileging others via the methodological pathway of third-person objectivity already prepared for in the misunderstanding of the Aristotelian four causes as external forces. Now, if we go looking for external forces, it's external forces that we will find. This will, over the course of the centuries, lead to certain conceptual mistakes. Take, for example, physics classes. In secondary education, at least the way they are done in Hungary. You would, in physics classes, regularly have the teacher present to you little experiments, pushing trolleys and so on and so forth. If you're a student, if you're well-behaved or lucky, perhaps you get to do these experiments too. But when I push my little trolley around, checking for variables and constants such as gravity, drag, inertia, velocity, etc., then I'm not making a polite contemplative deal with nature. I'm not like a naturalist pausing and standing very still to watch a bird, or in modern days, this is the same problem as the observer phenomena, or the observer effect, for example, in quantum uncertainty, as depicted by Schrödinger's cat. When I experiment with my trolleys on the table, I am the demiurge of that little world, assuming control and responsibility, if over a very limited and clearly delineated part of creation, but also being tempted to forget about any other creator, or perhaps imagine him just like myself. The god of the deists is a kind of mechanic who sets up the piece and goes his merry own way. Or maybe he doesn't, but is radically fundamental and different and alien from it. Even here, though, note that this is a methodological fiction. My so-called third-person view of the trolley is actually a distillate or accumulation of my first-person sensory reports, right? Because I am watching it, I am pushing it around. What does this mean? This means that these experiences, knowledge, is translated through the privacy of my own mind, even at the most basic level. And this is, again, not touching on the question of intentionality. For example, I am learning about the forces of physics because I want to push the trolleys around and I want to observe them. They are colliding on my table because I am pushing them around. So ultimately, it's still a hypothesis. I'm still working on the basis of subjective intentionality and not on impersonal objectivity. The primary datum always remains the transcendental I, upon which all claims of reality are founded. If you conceive your mind as a theatre or a little television. The story of Francis Crick, the DNA person. After later in his career, he started giving public lectures on the question of consciousness, and then a little lady came up to him after one of the lectures and said, "Well, I think you're all wrong. I think you should just imagine your sort of consciousness as just like a little television in your mind, you see." And then Crick responded, yeah, well, who's watching it? Anyway, the point is that this methodological fiction of pure verification outside subjectivity is the sort of illusion that the efficiency of the scientific revolution makes really tempting. Newton, whom we've heard about today, worked with exactly this kind of system apart from when he could not predict the movement of certain celestial movements, right? When his math was off. Why was his math off? Because Newtonian physics can't be used on the cosmic scale. It gets things wrong. We needed to wait for Einstein to understand them, and when Newton's maths was off, he said that, yeah, well, fair enough, God usually leaves the planets alone, and then sometimes he makes personal, individual changes on them. This is how he, in his mechanistic universe, had to explain his calculations being wrong. The efficiency and practical exploitability of physics yielded two options then, when you're thinking about the world, which is a very narrow selection for modernity. Either a Cartesian dualism, right, with self-sufficient, mechanical, dead matter, and an increasingly irrelevant soul, or you had a materialistic monism that posits that phenomena of mind, such as the unity of consciousness, intentionality, these things are somehow supervenient or emergent or epiphenomenal, or indeed denies that such might even really exist, like Patricia Churchland or Daniel Dennett. But if mechanical nature and or bodiless mind are not desirable options for our philosopher, then what is the solution for the problem? Well, here the window of possibilities should be opened up beyond the last 400 years and Western civilization. Hart proposes, and this is, we've been skirting around this topic in the last day and a half, but I think we should really come to a conclusion and say it. Hart proposes the primacy of mind. Matter, for David Bentley Hart then, is real but dependent and an emanation of the noetic realm. The physical, poetically phrased if you want, is like a condensed, thickened thought. It's like incarnated thought. Matter, this is, he says, big matter, without mind, can't become mind. But mind can become all things. Physical matter is a reflection of a rational and ideal order. Here, honorably, he also bites the bullet, right? Because whereas he rightly points out that all emergentisms are just forms of the pleonastic fallacy, that is the idea that quantitative differences can eventually transform into qualitative ones. We've heard Father Yaki's critique of the question, right? That if I heap enough molecules together, I'll get an organism. Or if I get enough neurons firing together, I get a transcendental self. Plainly false. He does acknowledge that mind too needs a foundation from which to come. Only that he argues that mind can and in fact must only rest on and be grounded on mind alone. This he calls, not without a hint of irony, the testitudinal principle. Like from testudo, turtle, the old story from the 1500s of the Jesuit priest going to India asking Hindus about their worldview, and then the guru starts, so what does the world look like? Well, yes, the world is a disc. Okay, fair enough, and what is the disc situated on? And then the guru says, well, it stands on 4 pillars. Okay, fair enough, what are the 4 pillars standing on? Well, the guru says, well, on 4 elephants. And then what are the 4 elephants standing on? Well, they stand on turtles. And then the Jesuit says, yeah, but what are the turtles standing on? And the guru says, it's turtles all the way down. The point is that for Hart, it is really thoughts all the way down. Because there is no way into the self-subsistence of unity, consciousness, intentionality, rationality, etc. These phenomena must rest upon themselves. So mind must be foundational. Particular instances, like something good or a beautiful thing, will rest upon the infinite beauty or goodness of which they are a limited expression. Which is really just Plotinus, if you think about it, but it's true. So the world structure is mind-like, only because it actually does issue from mind. Contingent beings are finite instances and expressions of the infinite. This infinite is encountered twice, that is the inward infinity of the ground of all mental agency, the abiding witness behind which stands the spark of divine light that imparts life and knowledge to the soul, And you have the outward infinity of the unity of being and the intelligibility of all things. The ground of both consciousness within and being out there is what we would call, Hart cheekily says, for want of a better term, God. God as mind is the foundation of all things. This revolutionary return to a more holistic understanding found in many venerable traditions, both East and West, is to say that if you cannot successfully take consciousness and intentionality and the unity of apprehension and take all these wonderful phenomena and reduce them down, then you can take them and reduce them up. If his proofs are not conclusive, because these things are different to understand, at least they reassure the reader that we can believe that our perception of reality is mind-like only because actually it does proceed from one. This more dignified view of matter must then differ from Cartesian dualism because it posits an intimate connection between mind and matter. For Hart, it's a matter of all the way up, it's matter all the way up and mind all the way down. Or as Schelling says, nature is visible spirit and spirit is invisible nature. The syntax of mechanism will always be informed, literally informed and given form, by the semantics of spirit, making everything meaningful. But lastly, a word on Rod Dreher as well, to finish on. You know how in old Latin textbooks, if you read them, units will be divided into a pars theoretica and a pars practica. Well, Dreher's far shorter book, Living in Wonder, is a sort of what does it feel like to think this way commentary on Hart's argument, right? It's about enchantment. The young Rod Dreher retells the story of him going into Schacht Cathedral as a teenager and being taken by the beauty, and he is moved by the kindness of strangers as a dissolute divorcee in Budapest and Jerusalem. This too, of course, is an ancient idea, forcefully revivified in the modern age by Pierre Hadot, who says that to be a philosopher has always been to be in some way set apart from the common conduct of life, the usual manner of seeing and acting, that is, in our day, Cartesianism or materialism. Dreher's book, with his journalistic accounts of both friends and strangers, experiencing enchantment in prayer, fasting, contemplation, exorcisms, conversion, revelation, etc., are exactly what Hadot calls the spiritual exercises of philosophy. That is, and I quote, physical as in dietary regimes, or discursive as in dialogue or meditation, or intuitive as in contemplation, but which are all intended to effect a modification and a transformation in the subject who practice them. This is a fruitful circularity, right? I pray because I believe, I believe because I pray, etc. We cannot force enchantment to happen, says Dreher, but we can certainly, through the right theory and right praxis, make ourselves open to it. David Bentley Hart speaks on many pages explaining how it's a category error to heap mechanistic syntax in piles and expect to find intentional semantics emerge. Dreher wishes the reader to learn once again, and I quote, to see all the world as metaphors in a cosmic book authored by God, here of course with a distinct echo of Bonaventure. He wants us to see the semantic content of being, right? The semantic content, not syntax. Syntax is mechanics, right? Syntax is grammar. Semantics is in the actual meaning of creation. He likewise understands that enchantment is not something super added to the material world, but a quality that inheres in the thing itself, simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary. What is novel in Dreher is that, because Hart's book is a book on philosophy of mind and not one on theology, is that Rod Dreher can also say that we can become blind to the understanding of nature in such a way because of sin, right? And he uses the Divina Commedia as the explanation, right? Before Dante can see heaven, he has to be purified of his sin, right? So contemplation is preceded by asceticism. Now, I'd be remiss not to point out the incompleteness of the project of Rod Dreher's book Living in Wonder, because there are still vestiges of Cartesianism, such as talk of interaction of matter and spirit, which is still dualist or disenchantment, and enchantment being a left-brain, right-brain issue. But regardless, not even Rod Dreher would think this way. So just to finish, and I've got literally one paragraph left. Although both writers are dismissive of the word magic for their own reasons, and Hart avoids even the word enchantment as a technical term, Dreher's Italian friend, one of these interviewees, provides the yardstick for our investigation and the title for my talk today when he says, if there is magic, there must be a magician. David Bentley Hart's book starts with the goddess Psyche plucking a rose and, wrapped in beauty, being taken up into contemplation, that is magic, And the resulting pages are a dialogue in search of the magician behind the beauty of the flower and the delight found in it. Dreher's book samples accounts of enchantment, encounters with the numinous, both good and bad, with the support system of spiritual exercises in the sense of Pierre Hadot, allowing the reader to see the reality for what it truly is. Our task then is to be brave and to return the loving gaze directed at us from the natural order, right? In the hope that even in modernity, such a communion may be established. Let us look for that magician while we do have the magic around us yet. Thank you very much.